Raphael Washington Press Club Foundation. Y'all talk back to me, I'm a Baptist preacher. Listen, since they asked the pastor to close, I guess you could call this the benediction. Or since we are meeting in what used to be Trump International Hotel, perhaps it's an exorcism. In any case, I'm glad that I was able to be here at this year's annual congressional dinner to celebrate the important role of the press in our democracy, as well as the vital function bipartisanship plays in our ability to get things done in Washington for the people we represent back home. And I have to admit that it is really good for me to be here, finally, after I have a full 6-year term. I've been on the ballot, as has been said, 5 times. 5 times in 3 years. Clearly, I wanted this doggone job. But I don't have to tell this crowd, many of you were there. I recognize your faces. A lot of you took the midnight train to Georgia, camped out in Georgia for my Senate race, and then the runoff, and then my other primary, and then the general, and then the runoff. In fact, some of you even showed up at my church while I was preaching on Sunday morning. And I don't mind. In fact, I'll do just about anything to get some journalists to come to church. I was delighted to see many of you in the pews of Ebenezer Baptist Church. But let me be honest. How can I say this lightly? It was obvious that some of you have never been in a black church. I saw some of you slip out after the first 2 hours. Somebody should have told you. We stay in church for a little while. Our worship is a little bit animated. The Episcopalians seemed a little nervous when people started talking back to me. I understand we call the Episcopalians in the Baptist church, we call y'all the frozen chosen. The closer we got to that 1 hour mark, the Catholics were all looking at their watch because Mass never lasts more than an hour. I understand. I've been to Mass. It shouldn't last longer than an hour. But let me just help you out in case you stumble once again into a black church. I'll give you a little bit of advice for free. We stay there a little while. We're a little bit more animated. And here's something that's very important to know. We don't clap on the 1 and the 3. We clap on the 2 and the 4. I'm not pointing anybody out, but somebody tell the president. Speaking of important people, let me recognize some of the lawmakers and some of the honorees who are here tonight. I'm thrilled to be headlining tonight's dinner along with my fellow lawmaker and in the spirit of bipartisanship, Representative Nancy Mace. Give some love to Congresswoman Nancy Mace. We were talking a little while ago, and as it turns out, she lived in Atlanta for a little while, basically, and we lived in the same neighborhood. And, you know, I don't mind saying, regarding this Republican, that she clearly is an amazing person. She has charted out her own path. She's an independent thinker. She has called herself pro-baby, pro-gun, pro-pot, and pro-gay. It's just like that old campaign slogan, a chicken in every pot and some pot for every gay baby. Nancy is an independent thinker. And she doesn't mind taking unpopular positions. This South Carolina Congresswoman loves to tell you that she is a proud graduate of the University of Georgia. Go Dogs! You think it's hard standing up to party leadership? Try being a Georgia Bulldog in Gamecock Nation. And speaking of South Carolina representatives, Representative Mace serves alongside one of my biggest supporters in the Senate, and I am speaking, of course, of Senator Lindsey Graham. People like to hate on Lindsey Graham, but let me just tell you, he's been nothing but gracious to me since he lost his run for the Georgia Senate seat twice. And on that note, I was grateful to see several of my other Senate colleagues. Some were here earlier and have already left. I guess they heard the Baptist preacher was speaking. But let me say that there's one man who was here earlier who prayed harder than anybody else for my victories. I am a faith leader, but he prayed harder than the preacher. Yes, I'm talking about Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. In fact, I think that Senator Schumer would have prayed the rosary while facing Mecca if he thought it would turn out more voters in the Atlanta suburbs. I have to admit that it wasn't until the runoff that I knew that Chuck Schumer was a praying man. And when I asked him about it, he said, you know, Raphael, the Lord and the DSCC work in mysterious ways. Now, I know the spirit of this dinner is one of bipartisanship. But while we're on the subject of elections, show Herschel Walker how to say that, elections, let me just offer a word of advice to my colleagues who are up for re-election in 2024. I offer this advice, since I know a thing or two about winning against the odds. First, if possible, consider running against a running back. I'm just telling you how to win. Or consider running against an out-of-touch millionaire. Or consider running against an out-of-touch multimillionaire running back. Second, if your opponent acts like your first and middle name is radical liberal, and your opponent says that 15 times in the first 3 minutes of a debate, just smile, you're winning. And most importantly, if you remember nothing else, remember this: closing out your campaign by laying out your thoughts and your profound reflections on the important public policy debate over whether it's better to be a werewolf or a vampire is not a winning message. Y'all didn't know the pastor could be petty, right? Listen, I often tell folks that I'm not a senator who used to be a pastor, but a pastor who serves in the Senate. And my faith is central to my work to center people in our politics and deliver for the people of Georgia. But I was surprised that when I came to the Senate, how much the Senate itself needs a pastor. I don't mind being the senator when I'm here, the pastor when I'm in Georgia, but too often my colleagues, quite often, have asked me to be the pastor in the Senate. Not only do they come up often on both sides of the aisle and ask me to pray for them, my colleagues constantly come up to me with heavy hearts in moments of confession. I take that very seriously, and so I would only share that in strict confidence with this gathered crowd. Last week, Cory Booker told me he ate a piece of bacon. Mark Kelly confessed that the moon landing really was a hoax. Bernie Sanders told me that he once went out on a date with a billionaire. Mitt Romney told me he once considered a tax hike Elizabeth Warren style. Elizabeth Warren told me she once strapped Bailey to the roof of her car, Mitt Romney style. The only person who's never asked me for absolution is Rand Paul. Still, all in all, being a person of faith really does help me navigate Washington. It helps me to keep things in a certain perspective. Reading the scripture is helpful, you know. I mean, think about it. If the Egyptians could handle blood, frogs, flies, boils, hail, and locusts, we can handle House Republicans. These must be the Republicans on this side. Especially since we have Leader Hakeem Jeffries leading us through the Red Sea. Before I close, I want to focus a bit on the reason we're all here. And that's to honor the vital role that a free press serves in keeping our citizenry informed and holding our leaders and our institutions accountable, which is necessary for a healthy democracy. I'm so deeply honored to be here tonight with so many respected journalists and members of the media, including tonight's trailblazing honoree, Ms. Connie Chung. And it's wonderful to be here with so many journalists all in a room at a time when I'm not fighting for my political life. I'm grateful that all of you are here, but I want especially to call out my hometown paper, Tia and others, at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution has been a pillar of my home state since the paper's founding 155 years ago. And of all the things that existed in Georgia in the 1860s, I'm glad to say that the AJC still does. Thanks for your service to our state. I deeply admire all of the journalists, but Scripture tells us, instruct the wise, and they will be wiser still. In other words, I have just a few areas of feedback I'd like to share. Here's just one example. After getting through 4 Senate campaigns and countless news cycles within each one, I noticed that not always, but every so often, there would be the occasional headline putting sensationalism over substance. Let me give you one example. This is from PolitiFact, and I'm reading it to you verbatim. Raphael Warnock may love puppies, but that beagle was borrowed. Come on, y'all. Can't I borrow a friend's dog? And walking somebody else's puppy, is that not the neighborly thing to do? Now I got GOP operatives in the meantime asking me for Alvin the Beagle's long-form adoption record. Seriously, my opponents were going around saying that I lied about Alvin the Beagle being my dog. Here is the truth. I'm going to give you the exclusive. Alvin was actually a paid actor. He needed the money after a Long Island congressman stole thousands of dollars from his GoFundMe page. And so I'm moving now to my seat, and as I close, and nobody believes a preacher when he says, as I close. But thank you so much for the important work that you do. You are, in a very real sense, the first drafters of history. You, unlike anybody else, hold the power to account. You tell the stories that sometimes would go untold. For good reason, you're called the Fourth Estate. You stand on the front lines of our democracy as a bulwark against misinformation, against tyranny and corruption. And as a voice for Georgians in the Senate, let me just say this to you. Keep the faith. Keep up the good work. Keep asking the hard questions, no matter what. We need you. And thanks again for having me with you tonight. If you liked my remarks, my name is Raphael Warnock. If you didn't, I'm Senator Tim Scott. Good night, everybody. Keep the faith.